Both the United States and China are adding yet more pressure to their already strained bilateral relationship. This week, U.S. President Joe Biden unveiled details of the AUKUS security pact between Australia, Britain, and the United States, designed to push back against China in the Indo-Pacific by supplying nuclear submarines to Australia. A few days earlier, Chinese President Xi Jinping consolidated his grip on power at China's annual parliamentary meetings. During the meetings, he unveiled a range of new appointments, including a new defense minister, and delivered a tough-worded speech accusing the United States of attempting to contain China's development. These latest moves come at a newly dangerous moment in the U.S.-Chinese standoff. After a brief, false thaw following a friendly Biden-Xi meeting in November, neither Beijing nor Washington seems capable of taking meaningful and sustained steps to increase trust, let alone induce cooperation. Both are also readying further measures to compete with one another in the economic, military, and technological domains, which raises the risk that competition could all too easily spill over inadvertently, or even deliberately, into conflict. The Biden administration hopes for a relationship characterized by competition with guardrails. But it risks a new period of tit-for-tat competition with no guardrails at all. Only a few short months ago, an air of tentative optimism had settled over Sino-U.S. ties. After the nadir of last year's trip by former U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi to Taiwan, Biden and Xi's bilateral November meeting in Bali, Indonesia, inaugurated what looked like a thaw. The last thing the Chinese need right now is an openly hostile relationship with the United States, U.S. National Security Council Indo-Pacific Coordinator Kurt Campbell said last December. They want a degree of predictability and stability, and we seek that as well. This positive tone did not last. First, the furor over China's surveillance balloon prompted U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken to cancel a planned trip to China. Blinken then had a notably frosty meeting with Wang Yi, director of the Chinese Communist Party's, CCP, Central Foreign Affairs Office, at the Munich Security Conference. Which side is to blame for this negative turn is in many ways less important than the perceptions each has of the other's position. Both blame the other and therefore feel justified in readying new measures to signal their displeasure. Take the mood in Washington first. Biden's team feels the United States is in a good place with respect to China, for three reasons. The first is policy successes, notably last October's rules limiting Chinese access to advanced semiconductors. U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said in September 2022 that the United States aimed to maintain as large of a lead as possible in advanced technology. The subsequent chip measures were clinically targeted at critical choke points in the global chip supply chain, and have since been backed by important partners, including Japan and the Netherlands, two key players in the advanced semiconductor ecosystem. The balloon episode was viewed broadly positively in Washington too. Biden's decision to deploy an F-22 fighter jet armed with Sidewinder missiles to down the balloon, albeit after a delay, made the United States look decisive. Meanwhile, China's shifting explanations for its balloon activities looked evasive at best. Second, Biden's team feels it is working well with Indo-Pacific allies and partners to develop new measures targeting China. Of those, a UK-US has the highest profile. But in January, the United States and Japan unveiled a slew of moves to deepen their mutual economic and military ties. So many, in fact, that U.S. officials in conversation with the author dubbed the month Japanuary. To take one example, the U.S. Marine Corps' new 12th Marine Littoral Regiment will move to Japan over the coming years, a step that U.S. Assistant Defense Secretary Ely Ratner may have had in mind late last year when he predicted imminent, transformative, changes for the U.S. military's force posture in the Indo-Pacific. Ties between India and the United States are also buzzing following the unveiling last month of the U.S. India Initiative on Critical and Emerging Technology, a deal to co-develop technology and establish supply chains circumventing China. Finally, Biden's foreign policy team has been lifted by the Democratic Party's performance in last November's midterms. At this midway point in the U.S. political cycle, exhausted national security officials often head for the exits. But the recent departure of Laura Rosenberger, senior director for China and Taiwan on the U.S. National Security Council, was notable for being the exception rather than the rule, as Biden's defense and foreign policy teams are largely staying in their posts and plotting new measures targeting China. First up will be new rules to limit U.S. outbound investment and stop American venture capitalists from putting money into China's defense and technology sectors. Other measures are likely to focus on critical minerals, green technologies, and cloud computing. At the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue Summit in Australia and the G7 Summit in Japan, both of which will take place in May, more initiatives are likely. It is harder to gauge China's mood, but judging by Xi's public remarks, Beijing is also in no mood for compromise. Xi gave a tough speech in early March, assailing Washington in unusually blunt language. Western countries led by the United States have implemented all-around containment, encirclement and suppression of China, which has brought unprecedented severe challenges to our country's development, he said, according to news agency Xinhua.